Candice, more alcoholic. Thank you guys so much for allowing me to spend this weekend with you, and to everyone that has shared so far. These are powerful weekends. Powerful weekends. You know, I was listening to Polly talk, and she was talking about her sons, and I thought about my sister, and there's some energy there that is not clear. And so what that means is that when I leave after this weekend, I will reach out to my sister, right? This is what this is for. It's all about a continued healing, a continual awareness. There is no plateau. There is no I get to this stage, this age, and then I'm done. If I want to stay here, if I want to live to maximum effectiveness, I have to stand ready to continue to uncover, discover, and discard. A huge thanks to Jimmy and Mary Beth. Mary Beth, because she was my karaoke partner, killed it. Thank you. So let me just tell you something. I am not a singer. I just look cute. Thank you. And so Mary Beth was like, we gotta, and I was like, no. And she's like, yeah, we gotta. And she's competitive. I'm like, well, then you definitely don't want me as your partner. You know what I mean? I don't want like all that resentment and y'all writing and talking to me about your sponsor. So anywho, we decided on Aretha Franklin, Chain of Fools. And we just did it and missed verses and committed anyway. And so, you know, the beauty of staying sober is that without Alcoholics Anonymous, without the principles, I have to look good at all costs. And I'm never going to do anything that causes me to not look good. But then I listened to Polly again. She talked about face planting and the fear. I have spiritually face planted so many times. And so why not get up here and do it? And, you know, I was off key. It didn't matter. It didn't matter, like just tick it off, the freedom to be, to do, to experience. And so that is what we are doing here today. We are celebrating each other. We are walking with one another through our unfoldment. We are grabbing each other throughout the weekend and pulling each other aside and sharing some stuff that's going on, because that's what we do. We have to trudge together, period. You know what I mean? And so, and Jimmy, because Jimmy is just cool. Jimmy just is like, he's just got that swag. He loves sobriety. He's going to put it together. You know what I mean? He's like, I'm just going to give it to you like this, right? And so I respect that, right? And everyone else, a lot of these people I have traveled with over the years, I've known, and so always a pleasure to hear their interpretation of this process. And my friend Michelle and I have known each other since back in the day in LA. And we've remained friends, and her husband, Luke, who loves and supports her. It is important for me to see what love looks like and how it is demonstrated continually, right? And to understand that everything we've gone through opens us to a door of our truth and stepping into that truth. And so it's just beautiful to see that love continue to grow and flourish, and I always like to acknowledge it because I like to celebrate my friends being happy. I am going to talk about 8 and 9. And I'm going to do my own recap of 1 through 7, because that's what I have to do if I'm going to talk about 8 and 9, right? I wouldn't just start a sponsee on 8. We got to talk about the rest of them and have that experience. But there's something I want to share with you. I am a member of H&I, and they may call it different things in different towns, but that means hospitals and institutions. So I have had panels for a number of years, right? And for the last few years, have had jail panels. So I have 2 jail panels, and I have 1 panel that has women and children. And so that is a way for me to continue living in amends to my daughter, who is not in my life, right? To be able to bring some healing and some strong women to those panels. And so my jail panels are also women. One of them, I get maybe 70 to 80 women. I never ask these women what they've done because I don't care, right? You didn't ask me what I did when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. You asked me if I wanted what you had. And most of the time, you didn't even ask me that. You just said, come where we go and do what we do. And so I like to do a lot of workshops. And I do workshops because what they do is they bring the steps to life. Right? It's one thing to be in a speaker's meeting and you hear someone talk about their story and how they got sober. They may or may not reference a particular step or what that looks like for them. But in a workshop, it gives the participant an opportunity to really have the experience. And so I had done an amends workshop with my girls. And this time I had, I think, 50 women. And so I asked for 10 volunteers. These women and I have trudged, because I've had this panel for a while. Some of them are waiting to go to prison. Some of them are going through trials. They may have already been there 3 or 4 years, right? Some have just come. They've been there a few months. Either way, they know me, they trust me, and they know I'm always going to give it to them correct, right? And so when I ask for volunteers, they want to be a part of it. They know it's going to be uncomfortable, but they want to be a part of it. And the way we address each other is we call each other sister. And so it is very important, and I always set the tone and say whatever we discuss here stays here. You cannot use it against each other when I'm not here, because we are sisters. Society has already said that we're not going to be, we're not going to do, we can't have. And so what we get to do is the opposite of all of that. And so when I did the amends workshop, I had walked them through steps 1 through 7. Right? And then I gave them a couple of examples, as I'm going to do with you tonight, on my experience with the amends process. And so the first woman, she's gruff, and she's always come when I come to the panel, and she's a badass. And so I have 2 rows of 5. They face each other. Any workshop I do, I always have 10. That's my number. And so 2 rows, they always face each other with whatever we're going to do. And so what I said is this row, right, let's say the right row is the row that's making the amends. The opposite row, the person facing you, is the person you're making the amends to. And so by the time I had walked through the purpose of why we are making an amends, they're already emotional, and I don't know how emotional. So this woman, before we start, she says, "Can I make amends to someone if they've already died?" And I said, yes, you can. And so she said, okay. So she starts it off, and she starts to make amends to her grandmother, who apparently was just like everything to her. And she's crying. And so now the person that's facing her is crying, and she's talking about all the things she's done, all the things she wished she hadn't done. And she wishes that she had been able to make these things right, and she's sorry that she had been in and out of jail and in and out of prison. And so then the woman who was acting as her grandmother says, "I've only ever loved you. I've only ever wanted for you to be okay." And you have to understand, these are women that, you can't just run home to the arms of your children or your spouse or your family members. You have to stay in there. You're going to sit with this knowledge. And now it's even more acute, right, because of this experience. So she's crying. Now this woman's crying. And because of this amends, the way she kicked it off, the next woman is already crying. You know what I mean? And so it's just emotional. And by the time we get to the second row, people are just snotting. And so when we sat down, right, when they finished those amends, and we sat down and we just opened it up for discussion, what I said is, if you are this affected, and this is one amends, you look at all the people that you have screwed over. If you got that relief from one amends, and I'm talking hardcore crying, you can imagine the freedom, because until we experience it, we have no idea of what's in store. My disease, the disease of alcoholism or illness, I'm not getting into all that. You know what I mean? Whatever it is I have that causes me to want to burn my life to the ground does not want me to live in freedom. It does not want me to live in dignity. It does not want me to live in peace. It does not want me to be of maximum use. And so I'm going to stop there. My sobriety date is August 16th, 1995. That's my date. That date is the reason I breathe. It is the reason I wake up in the morning. It is the reason I get out of bed. I defend that date, right? And so over the years that I've been here, many things have had to change in order for my date to remain the same. I have had to surrender behaviors and belief systems that do not support me continuing on as a sober woman in Alcoholics Anonymous. When I got sober, I was 96 pounds. Not 96 today, And so 96 pounds, and I was talking about it on Thursday because your Thursday speaker was sick, and so I filled in, and so you guys who were Thursday, just journey with me in solidarity. And so So I was talking about that I got sober at 28 years old. I'm 50 years old now. And I looked just far older then than I do now. And when I was in my 20s, I looked back at the rare pictures that have not just been destroyed, right? And I was like a size 0, but always sucking my stomach in. For what, right? And so now that I absolutely should suck it in, I don't feel like it, no. And a nutritious meal for me would be a Snickers bar every 3 or 4 days, you know what I mean? And when I got sober, I was missing every strand of hair on my head. I am giving you hair today. I thought, you know what, let's give them a little something fun. And so, and then they're saying, we're going to go right to the banquet after the talk. I'm like, oh no, I have a banquet outfit. It will be seen tonight. So, someone get me a plate, set it there, because I will be back down. And so, anywho, so what would happen is I would drink, and as I started getting my drink on, there were things that were going on in my hair. There were visitors, they lived there, they were aggressive, they were disrespectful, okay? And I remember telling my friend something's in my hair. She was visibly alarmed. She leaned back. She asked me, how do you know? I said, because while we've been talking, they ran from this side to that side. So she didn't give me direction per se. She shared information. I embraced it. She said, rubbing alcohol will sterilize anything. She never said, go to the store, purchase a bottle of rubbing alcohol and pour it all over your hair, but I think we all agree it was implied. And so that's what I did. I got the bottle of rubbing alcohol before I took action. I had dialogue. I was inspired to see if we could come to some type of agreement, some type of harmony, right? Tradition 1, unity. And, they were just not having it, so they got aggressive. I got aggressive. I took a pair of scissors. I cut off all my hair. And then new friends, half measures avail us nothing. So I took a shaver. I shaved it all off to the scalp. I would wear T-shirts on my head as if they were fashionable turbans, making my own statement. And then, because the picture's not complete. No, we want transparency. When I came to you, I was missing my front tooth. Here's what happened. I shared an opinion and it was not supported. That's what happened. It never stopped me from talking. I will get the message out, and I would talk like that, right? I share all of that because I was in a relationship with alcohol, and I was committed, and I wasn't leaving no matter what. I'm going to stand strong for it. The way I stood for alcohol is the way I stand for my sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous. 28 years old, that was the sum total of absolutely every idea, every good thought, every plan B that I had. And so in order to recover from that, because there's a lot of shame, here is like one of the most painful experiences, to look pretty and feel ugly. It takes nothing. It takes nothing for me to come to you. Obviously, the tooth has been fixed, right? I remember, people, because we're not all healed at the same time. And so I've been of service in Alcoholics Anonymous at conferences. And, what will happen is, I'm going to share that later. Okay, never mind. I'm going to share it now. Okay, so, someone's in line. This has happened more than once at different places. And so, this girl, she's like, I really loved your talk. And then she goes, what tooth was it? What tooth was it? I said, you're so tacky, move. So anyway, and you know what? I don't owe an amends for that. You know why? Because I don't want her to be confused. I don't want her to do that to someone else. I want us to be clear. That's unacceptable. There you go. And so to come 28 years sober, get the tooth fixed, the hair has grown back, right? The weight has come, it looks just normal weight, but we have a lot of behaviors that went into me looking like that by the time I came to you. What I love about Alcoholics Anonymous is that we are loving here, that we are loving here, that we care here. And people will communicate that in different ways, but the overall feeling is that we care here. And so this is what we're going to talk about tonight, are things lipstick can't fix. Right? By the time I had gotten sober, I had had a career. I had walked away from that career. I had made some decisions that took me out into an entrepreneurial type of endeavor. I like to refer to it as the public relations phase of my development. And The police call it something else, but we're going to say public relations. And the investors felt very good about the product, right? They were willing to invest heavily and repeatedly. You understand what I'm saying? And then, right, you lose a few strands of hair and a tooth, and all of a sudden my stocks plummet and they start getting all uppity. And so I had to relocate to the MacArthur Park estate. Some refer to that as Skid Row. And so, where real estate is cheap and they don't expect a gal to have all her teeth. And so coming to you, when I got sober and I went through a recovery home, which has nothing to do with Alcoholics Anonymous, but it allowed me a safe place to get still enough for the members like myself that have panels that come in. And they didn't carry the message of my opinion. They didn't carry the message of my other addiction. They carried the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm an alcoholic. First and foremost, anything else really doesn't matter, right? And so I remember listening to them and then going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and looking at women and being able to appreciate the beauty of another woman, because I'm going to tell you something. I'm so glad that everyone has talked about all the steps, like from the phenomenal step 1 talk that just broke it down. If you don't hurt in step 1, you don't need step 2. If you're not in pain in step 1, it's because you're not done. Write your sobriety date in pencil, right? They told me when I got sober, write your date in ink. My date is in ink in every conference-approved literature that I have, because that's my date, my first, my last name, and my sobriety date. And so if I would look at another woman and I've not yet got into healing, what's going to happen is I'm going to build a case as to why that woman and I are different, why she thinks she's whatever it is, and how I'm not, and all of that. And I can't afford it, not if my primary purpose is to live to maximum effectiveness. So step 1 for me is just being overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed. And I talk about this not in terms only of drinking. I'm also talking not just to our new friends, welcome new friends, find some people that are excited about Alcoholics Anonymous, people that are doing things in Alcoholics Anonymous, people that are actively sponsored in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And I'm also talking to the people that have been here a number of years, because the ego, which is alcoholism, where my disease centers, ego will tell me that I can't tell you a lot of things that are going on, and it will kill me. It will kill me. I can't afford it, right? Ego and secrets are lovers, right? And so we got to break them up. We got to break them up. And so, coming here, looking at my experience with step 1, my experience when I've hit bottoms in sobriety, going into the beauty, the warmth, the grace, and the warm blanket of step 2, is just asking me, do I believe that I'm not the power, right? Because it's subtle the way our book, if my life is to be recreated, right, I have to believe that there's a power greater than me. And so then I'm going to turn my will and my thoughts over in step 3, get down into the inventory process of resentment, a fear, and a sex inventory. The resentment inventory was just beautifully described, and it's also very juicy. It's juicy. So I'm going to give you an example, and then I'm going to move on through so I can get to why I'm making the amends. Step 4 is a part of the equation. Step 9 is the freedom, right? Step 9 is where I step into my shoes as a woman. I am plagued by feelings of illegitimacy. I am plagued by feelings of feeling like a fraud. And so in order for me to step into my attire, I have to go through these steps. And so in the resentment inventory, because all of this is going to lead to my amends, I'm looking at my behavior. I don't live in steps 1 and 3 or columns 1 and 3. I live in columns 1 and 2 when I'm in untreated alcoholism, right? What they did. And then when I start looking for a solution, I'm going to move into columns 3 and then column 4. So here's an example. I slept with, well, we're not going to do this. We're going to say Tiffany keyed my car. So I'm resentful at Tiffany, column 1, why she keyed my car, column 2, what does it affect my security? She's a nut job, I don't feel safe. My pocketbook, she doesn't want to pay, I got to pay. My ambition, I thought we were like sisters. Personal relations, we were supposed to be friends. Self-esteem, she doesn't think much of me, right? My sex relations, I don't feel sexy when my car is keyed. And so column 4 Column 4, what was I? Selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, and frightened. I slept with her partner. She found out, keyed my car. Oh, okay. So now, right, because what step 4 does is it levels, it starts to do a correlation between my mouth and my actions. And what happens is there's a huge discrepancy. That's why people don't want to do step 4. There's a huge discrepancy because how I live without any type of principles, I'm just going to character assassinate her to everybody I know. Now we have social media, so I could do little digs on the post. You know what I mean? That type of craziness. And so when I get into columns 3 and 4, I'm looking at, okay, so there's been, every area of my life has been affected, and this is what I brought to the table. You thought you could trust me, but I'm in low self-esteem. I don't think I can be loved, so I'm going to take yours. That's a defect of character, right? Because the defects of character come out of that. And I'm doing what? I'm doing a step 5. I'm sharing that information with a sponsor who has gone through the steps, right? Who can share back with me. A sponsor doesn't have to match me toe to toe, but they don't want to overshare because I've had like a really dicey lifestyle. So when my babies are coming to me with their experience, I don't want to just give them like all my like seedy stuff. I like meet them where they're at. I don't want to traumatize them. You know what I mean? My sponsor's so competitive, you know, that type of thing. And so then I'm looking at the fears. I was afraid by the time I got to you, I'm toothless and bald-headed, so I'm afraid I'm too ugly to be loved. It didn't matter that my tooth had been fixed, my hair had grown back, I had a really cute partner in my life. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about spiritual deformity. That's why we're doing the work here. This is more about having a great hairstylist, right, and some great lover. This is looking at how I truly feel. When I'm standing next to another woman, do I understand my value? Do I understand my worth? Or am I bringing my fears to the table? Am I bringing my regrets to the table? The same thing about me jumping into a relationship. If I'm jumping into a relationship and I've not done any work, all I can bring to you is my brokenness, and then I make you responsible. That puts me in bondage. You are responsible for my healing and my happiness. It's unfair. So I started looking at those fears, why I have them, right? And then what would it look like in a healed state? Because I'm turning my will and my life over to the care of a spirit as I understand that spirit. My friend calls it the divine. Why would I be doing all of this if I really don't think it's healed? And then I looked at my sexual conduct. All of these things are leading up to me making that 8th step, right? Where did I arouse jealousy, suspicion, bitterness, and doubt? It's what I do. How else am I going to prove that you love me? You know what I mean? All that game playing. Where was I inconsiderate when I said hello? You thought partnership. I thought be cute, be freaky, have some money, hold my coat. You know what I mean? And whom did I harm? So we're not talking about the person I'm writing about. Who else has suffered fallout? I sponsor women, and these women have kids, and I share with them, I'd like to see you really develop some relationships with other women, because you can't just hook up with these guys that you just met and you're bringing them around your kids. You don't know where they've come from. You don't know what's in their background. We don't get to do that. That affects their security. It is hard to sit still and look at me. So the one thing I want to do is latch on to someone says, you're cute. Really? But to be cute and feel ugly, it's a dangerous combination, I'm telling you. And so in this sex inventory, I'm looking at these questions, right? Whom did I hurt? But then the game changer, and this is why I love Alcoholics Anonymous, this is why we're here this weekend, the big book never leaves me where it finds me. It meets me where I am. It reaches out its hand and says, stand up, Candice, walk with me. The next question, what could I have done differently? What? You mean I could really have a new experience and not just talk about it? And then you ask me to write my ideals. In order for me to truly attract that which I seek, I must be prepared to go to the remainder of these steps, right? The first thing on my sex ideals is a partner I can pray with. If we can't pray together, we can't lay together. I didn't know that a woman who came from where I came from would ever even desire that to be a characteristic of a relationship. I didn't know that I got to ask for that. I didn't know that it would be important, and I didn't know that I didn't know that I didn't know. And so I had to become open. If we can't pray together, we can't lay together. I work out a lot, and I was doing these stairs in Culver City, California. You ever in California, look me up. Let's work out together. 282 stairs carved into the side of a mountain. I do them 3 times. And so I was listening to this woman as I was preparing to run up the stairs into beast mode. Anyway, and so I was, and so this woman was on the phone, and I'm just hearing snippets of her conversation. I don't want to sum her character up. Yes, I did, but I don't want to. And so she was saying, and I was saying, she's talking to clearly her friend. She was like, I'm telling him, I'm not trying to get married or anything, right? So that was half the conversation. And then I come back around, and she's like, and yeah, so in my parenting classes, I was like, what? So so my head, and I don't want to do what Sheldon talked about earlier, 10% of the information, and I sum up her character. But what it sounds like to me was there's some type of sketchy guy, okay? She wants him, but she doesn't want to seem clingy, right? I'm not trying to marry you or anything. Yeah, you really are. You know what I mean? But whatever. You don't want to just outright say, are you going to put a ring on it or what? And then you're also trying to be a great mom, so you've got parenting going on. Well, we got to get the priorities together, because my head and what I've seen, that situation can be very crazy. You know what I mean? I'm going to leave it at that. I may touch on it a little bit later. So I'm looking at this in the inventory, the resentment, the fear, and the sex. I'm sharing this with my sponsor. And so as I'm writing things down, when my babies share, my sponsors do that for me, right? And so when I'm going through 6 and 7, I am going into the 12 and 12. We read the 2 paragraphs in the big book, but as Polly was sharing earlier, 6 and 7 they can be deal breakers, right? Because in step 7 it says we must make peace with these defects that made problem drinkers of us in the first place, to prevent a retreat into active alcoholism again. So the defects are born out of a lack of faith. There is some type of fear. What is a defect of character? It is a natural instinct that far exceeds its intended purpose. It's just a natural desire that has gotten warped based on my fear. My fear has contorted it. It has distorted it. So I hear a lot of things in Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're angry, you must not be working a program. That's stupid. Just pray for me. You know what I mean? If the deal is, if I'm angry, it's because I'm angry. If I slap you, now that's a defect of character. That's a very different deal, right? It's a natural defect of character. It's a natural instinct that has far exceeded its intended purpose. We talk about lust. If you're attracted to someone, that could fall into lust. If I disregard that you are already with someone and I go after you anyway, that is a defect of character, right? So I get to take a look at these defects when I'm doing an inventory. And so when I come out of all of this with that information and I start making my list after asking for whatever is objectionable to be removed, I start looking at the list of people I have harmed. And that's actually another inventory, right? Because what's going to go on my 8-step list is not only the people that have been on my 4th step, but they're going to be people that have never done anything to me. My 8-step isn't just save your 4-step list because that's going to be your inventory. No, there are people that literally just tried to love me. They tried to love me. And because I was coming from such a place of shame, such a place of regret, the only thing I could do is to harm them. Hurt people hurt people. When I was little, my grandmother raised me, and she loved me, and I loved her. And in her love, I felt I was safe, I was secure, and at night I would watch her as she slept, and I would pace my breathing to match her breathing. Because if she died, I wanted to die with her. That's the depth of love I had for my grandmother. What I don't always talk about is that my grandmother would share things with me that in hindsight maybe weren't appropriate. She would say things like, if you're going to lay down, get paid for it. I was 8 years old. And so what happened at 16 years sober is I started having all these visuals, like living movies of when I was little, things that went on, because there were men that used to come in the house a lot that were fond of children in a way that's not okay. And so I never blocked it out. It wasn't some suppressed memory. I just always kind of felt that's just what it was, right? And so at 16, it was a movie I couldn't see in front of me. It just was replaying itself. I couldn't look at my computer. The movie would start, and I had always had night terrors. And so I remember calling my sponsor at the time, and, you know, he didn't respond as I had hoped he would. I don't think he had experience with it. And he said, "You're in morbid reflection, just go to meetings," you know. And I thought, going to meetings, I need something else here. I don't know what to do. And so I reached out to a member of my then home group. My current home group is the Friday Night Women's Stag. My sponsor is Claire E. And at that time, it was a different sponsor. And I went to a member of my group and I asked her, "Do you know anyone in Alcoholics Anonymous who has experience with being molested that's worked through it with the steps?" And so she recommended me to one of the women she sponsors who's sober a long time, and she had me doing some inventory work. And one day I was talking to my dad. My dad is a retired manager, I'm sorry. And so I was talking to my dad, and I shared with him what was coming up. I'm thinking he's going to be shocked. I'm not raised with my mom, and I'm not raised with my dad. And so what he said was, I said, "You know, I'm having a lot of imagery around being molested." He said, "Oh, I know." I said, "How would you know?" And he said, "Well, your mom told me." "Well, how would she know?" My mother's crazy, but how would she know? And he said, "Your grandmother was selling you." I'm 16 years sober. And before I could build defenses in my mind, he just asked one question that shut it all down. He said, "Didn't you ever wonder how those men were getting in the house?" It was only her and I there. I had already known how they were getting in the house. I'd known it for years. But what it did is it devastated me. She was my only safe place as a child. When I was 12 years old, I was making a lemon meringue pie because that was my favorite pie. My grandmother would bring home a lemon meringue pie every week, because it was my favorite pie from Marie Callender's. And so I want to bake because she had all these cookbooks. I'm a horrible cook, but I was like, "I want to bake a lemon meringue pie." She supported everything I did. Okay. So she got all the ingredients, and that night before she went to bed, she asked me, "Are you going to bake a lemon meringue?" "Yep, I'm going to make a lemon meringue pie." And so I didn't know that you had to whip the meringue, you know what I mean? And so it said egg whites, so I had egg whites and a fork, right? So I'm beating the egg whites, they're not getting fluffy. I'm beating them, they're not getting fluffy. I'm beating them, they're not getting fluffy. So I'm 11 or 12 and I'm tired and I want to go to sleep and I want this pie to be over. I've already done the filling, and so I put a little cornstarch in the egg whites to stiffen it up. It's not getting fluffy. I put a little ice cream in it. It's not getting fluffy. And so I put some flour, you know what I mean? Just stiffen it right on up, and then I put it in the oven for however long, and then I put it in the refrigerator, and I just tried to block it out because I'm now traumatized by this whole lemon meringue pie. So the next morning, we're hanging out. Later that afternoon, she goes, "Did you make the pie?" Here's the funny thing. She had been in the refrigerator. She just didn't recognize it, right? And so, you know, I wanted to block the whole memory of that experience, and I said, "It didn't come out right." And she said, "Well, let me see it," right? And so I took the pie out and slid it across the table, and she cut a slice. And I thought she was going to do the grandmother thing. You take a bite and you go, "Don't worry, it'll be better next time." What she did is she ate the whole slice. You know what I mean? She ate the whole slice. And then she said, "Don't worry, it'll be better next time." But the beauty of that is love. And those contradictory emotions That is what I have lived with, those contradictory emotions, because what that does is that is how I start defining love. This woman let men come in. Don't tell me my grandmother didn't love me. Of course she loved me. She loved me. She had been a prostitute when she was a young girl. So we pass down what we have. That is why it's so important for us to come into this process and really immerse ourselves into the middle of it. And so now I am drinking, I am doing my thing, right? I have a daughter. I had her, but I had meant to not have her. When I found out I was pregnant, I had already left the entertainment industry, not the adult entertainment industry either. I had left the industry that I was working in. I worked for a record label. I was successful. My grandmother died. I just kind of felt disconnected when she died, and so I walked away from my career. I made the decision to enter into the public relations field and made a lot of money, actually, and then looked horrible and didn't make any money, but did more than I started out doing, going in and out of jails. And I've had women I sponsor go to jail overnight, and that's their bottom. I went to jail. That's my bottom. And I'm just like, oh, my God, that's so cute. You know what I mean? When I went to jail, it may have been a nap, but it wasn't my bottom, right? And so I was so exhausted every time I went to jail. I remember, people are so tough. This is kind of going a different direction, but I just need to say it. So people are so tough, and they go to jail, and they just cry and cry. If you're up for 8 and 9 days straight and you get arrested, you want to go to sleep, right? And so this woman was just crying and crying. And I remember saying, are you going to keep doing that? Because I am so tired. Anyway, she did not receive that well. I probably owe her an amends. So I found out I was pregnant. I was going to abort the pregnancy, and then I learned that a member of my family had been arrested for raping, torturing, murdering, and dismembering my 8-year-old little girl cousin, and that person who did it is my mom. It's a lot. It's a lot. I was talking to my friend Elda earlier, and I was showing her pictures of my family, and with every family member, my mother's mother is a murderer. She beat a woman to death with the heel of her shoe. My mother's a murderer. My dad's you know what I mean? My uncle's a murderer. He was killed in a riot in prison. You just look at it, and she said, this is making me sad. And she goes, it's making me want to cry. And I said, I've cried about it for a long time. But when you have the background I have, you have two choices. One is to cry and sit in a corner. The other is to stand up. I chose to stand up. It doesn't mean I don't still cry. Do you know what I mean? Because it's hard. It's hard when I'm at work and they're talking about their mom and they ask me, where's your mom? I just say she lives up north. Do you have any kids? No. I have 2 cats, actually. They are my babies. You know what I mean? So I found out that my mom had done this. It was on every news station, every radio station, every TV station. What do you do with that information? I'm on the streets. I'm in and out of abandoned buildings, jumping out of moving cars with the baby in my stomach because I'm doing things that make me have to exit quickly. I go through that pregnancy as if I weren't pregnant. I have my daughter. After 17 hours of labor, I name her Serenity. She's shaking in my arms because she's detoxing. That type of shame, I'm going to have to do a lot more than a cute hairstyle and a cute dress. That type of shame requires me to go through these steps with everything I have, hoping that the solution that has worked for you will work for me. Because all of this information's got to go somewhere. It goes to you. How I view me is how I see you. And so my daughter's never been in my life because I wasn't ready to get sober. I couldn't get sober. I couldn't even reunify her. I recently lost my stepmom. My stepmother was just everything to me. She wasn't my higher power, but she was everything to me. She was a safe place. She was a loving individual. She was someone that even if we had a disagreement, I knew she wasn't going to leave my life. I've had sponsors that I've exalted. I shouldn't have. and they're no longer my sponsor. I've had friends that I thought I would have forever. We're no longer friends, but my stepmom was always in my life, always in my corner. And I would go down to her job, loaded up 8 and 9 days, just looking crazy, smelling disgusting. And she never turned her nose up at me. Her coworkers did. She never did. She was always kind to me. And I remember that I was in and out of jail. I would always lie to her. And one day I told her that I had been lying to her about the money I was asking for. And she was so upset with me. And it wasn't until I was 11 years sober that we were having this conversation. I talked to my stepmom every day, twice a day, right? And we were having this conversation. I said, why were you so upset with me when I told you that I had been lying about the money I was asking? I would say, I need this money because I'm going to go take my daughter some clothes, right? But I've never seen my daughter since she was 3 days old. I hadn't seen her. And so my stepmom said, especially when I tried to get her back when I got sober and they told me my rights had been terminated, my stepmother said, because I would have taken her for you. I thought you were going to see her, and that meant you were going to get her back. Had I known you were never going, I would have taken her so she could be in your life. Do you know that I just wept? My daughter's never been in my life. I thought that no one had my back. No one was in my corner. This woman said she would have taken her, but I was lying. My defect of character, right? Trying to get something for nothing, thinking I'm getting over. This is what I sacrificed. And so what that means is I have to live in a way that my daughter will not be ashamed of me when she meets me. And so what I do is I do my best to heal with you. So I take panels into Mini House, women with children, so that they know they can be sober moms. They can break the cycle so that they can attract someone who will be healthy and loving and not harm their child when they're looking the other way and not harm them. And so all of these things brought me to the amend step. I've sponsored women. We've gone through the inventory. We've looked at the harms. We've looked at the 8-step list. And the 8-step list isn't the amends process. The 8-step list is an 8-step list. I need to look at who I owe. I need to look at who I've harmed. I need to look at whether I can or cannot make amends to that individual, right? Because some people, we can't. So I'm going to give you just a few examples, and I wrote some names down because I didn't want to forget the sordidness of it all. Anyway, okay, I can't see anything without my glasses. These are bifocals, but aren't they cute? Anyway, seriously, when they said you can't have to get bifocals, I said, well, I need to look at each and every frame you have. So, okay. So, when I was doing my deal, I got kicked out of my apartment because I had so much traffic coming in. They wouldn't accept my rent money. They're like, we don't want your rent money. We just want you to get out, right? Get out. And so I left that building. I left the apartment, but I didn't leave the building. I just went around the hallway and took over my neighbor's apartment. And, he benefited greatly. This man and I never had any type of anything going on, and I was a working girl, so I was always on the clock. And so, he allowed clients, if you will, to come to the apartment as well. So he got a lot of traffic, and then what started happening is he got resentful because all the stuff I get, I would share a little bit with him, and I tell him to go away. And so I left the apartment one night. I left someone in there. I went out to get some alcohol and whatever else. And while I was there, the lights had been turned off because we just weren't paying any type of light bills. At that point, everything we had went to drinking. So we were living by candlelight. And I was in this walk-in closet entertaining my guests. And so there was a man and a woman. They were both drunk. I left. She picked his pocket. She left. He was drunk, kicked over the candle. The apartment caught on fire. He came to disoriented because he didn't know where he was, jumps out the window, cuts his arm from wrist to shoulder. And I don't know any of this until I get back, which is the next morning, right? So I get back empty-handed. The money they gave me for whatever I've already spent. And I just figure I'll make amends to them later. And so I come back, and the manager, who was shifty, said, "What are you trying to do, burn down my apartment?" And I thought she just meant that I was really getting it on. You know what I mean? And I go upstairs, because I'm delusional like that. I go upstairs, the door is ajar, and I could see it looks like axe marks, but why would there be an axe in the door? And so I go in, and the carpet is soggy because the sprinklers had come on to put out the fire. So she's behind me, and she tells me everything that happened. This guy went to the hospital, and what they did, because my name wasn't on the lease, is they kicked this guy out of his apartment because he had let me in, and I'm using his apartment for my business. So he gets kicked out. I just went and used someone else. So when I get sober, I don't know where he is. I know that I owe him an amends. I don't know where he is. The other guy was a drug dealer, so he can work it out. But I don't know where my roommate is. And what happened is he used to get food from Project Angel Food. Project Angel Food delivers to those that have AIDS, or they're homebound with maybe cancer or something. They just can't come out, and so food is delivered. So Project Angel Food would deliver food to him every day, and he wasn't there, so I would eat it because I was hungry, and it was really good food too. And I remember him asking me one day, "Have you seen any food? They're supposed to be delivering." And I'm like, "No, you should call them and find out where it is," right? And so now that I'm sober, and I continue to eat his food because I was always hungry. And so now that I'm sober, I've not seen this guy in a while, period, ever. I don't know how to find him. He had gotten kicked out. I don't know where he went. We weren't friends. I had gone to a festival, and they had a volunteer sign-up tent for Project Angel Food. And so if I stand ready, because there have been direct amends I've been able to make, but there are some, like to this individual, that I'm not. So I signed up for Project Angel Food. And I remember orientation, everyone, because really it's primarily for patients with AIDS, that they're delivering food to. Now, I don't know if he had it or not, but you have friends and families, and they're sharing, I'm here because my son has AIDS and I want to do something to help. I'm here because my partner, is infected with HIV and I've heard of this organization. And I'm here because my coworker, and there's just all these lovely stories. And they get to me, and I said, "I'm here because I used to eat my roommate's food that you guys were delivering." And they just looked at me like, "Who does that?" You know what I mean? Whatever. I needed to get free. And so I volunteered for very close to 2 years. We prepared 1,000 meals every Sunday. And I drove 31 miles each way to get there on time. And then they would also need volunteers. Once you prepared the food, they would be always short on delivery people. And I would volunteer to deliver because I have to do something. It's not, "Well, I don't know where they are. There's nothing I can do." I need to do something because I don't want to feel like a fraud. I don't want to say I look cute and feel ugly and wonder why I can't make friends with other women because I always think they're better than me. Because that's what happens, because it's going to affect the way I sponsor as well. Women who are coming to us because they're hurting. So let me take my baggage somewhere else so that I can be fully present for you. I was living with my godmother. I was in and out of foster homes as a teenager, and my godmother had been a journalist for the publication I ended up working for. And, she was successful, USC graduate. She wasn't prepared for the type of stuff I was going to bring into her life. She just loved me, and she wanted to help me. She wanted to provide a safe and loving home for me. But loyalty demonstrated from someone who is hurting is very different than loyalty demonstrated from someone who is healed. And so my godmother was in a relationship, married this man who was not faithful and just not honorable, and I felt she was choosing him over me, and that was a problem because there were women calling the house all the time, and we all knew what was going on. my godmother was going to adopt me. I was 14 years old. She wanted to legally adopt me because she lived well and wanted to provide for me legally so I'd be protected. And my mom called her before she had done what she had done, and she said, if you adopt her, I'm going to burn down your house. And because my mother does burn down people's homes, she also specialized in Molotov cocktails. And so my godmother said, Candice, I can't have her doing this. And she said, so I can't adopt you, but you can continue to live here. I hope you understand. I was 14. I said, yeah, I understand. No, I don't understand. I'm a child. Why is it I'm not important enough for you to fight for? That would be a thread that has surfaced for years in my life. Why am I not important enough for you to fight for? Why won't someone stand up against this woman who's been on welfare for forever, beats my brother and sister, you know what I mean, is an absolute horror of a human being? Why are you letting her bully you? And what ended up happening is, I started to grow up. I'm a young teenager now. She went on a trip, and she had purchased her Mercedes. He had a Porsche. She had a Mercedes. And I think she told me something like, don't touch my car. I don't know. I know she didn't mean it. And so I, of course, touched the car because I had things to do. And so one of them was to go to a club. What better way to go to a club than in a brand new Mercedes? And so, that whole day was spent with Candice and Self, how Self would be featured, how Self would debut. And while I was in Self, I ran into someone else's car. Whoops. And so what I did, and it's interesting because I've told this story for forever, but there are specifics I leave out that I'm going to share now because we're talking about the amends, right? So I wrecked the car, but I had called my mom, which is the worst thing I could have done. I called my mother because she was going to be away for a few more days. I told her that I wrecked the car, and she said, well, I'll see if I can find someone to help you. In the meantime, her husband comes home, sees the car, and he says, I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. He also had a liking for me. So her husband and I end up getting together. And I get pregnant. And she gets pregnant. And he asked her to have an abortion. He asked me to have the baby. He took me out, put me up in a penthouse. And I said, I'm not having any babies. That's a wrap. I'm not having any baby. And I remember her asking me, because my mother called and said, did Candice tell you how she's going to fix the car? My godmother said, why would she want to fix the car? And that's when my mother told her that I had called her. I had said I didn't know anything about it. He had lied for me. So she came to me and she said, why is my husband lying for you? Are you having an affair with my husband? I said, no. I became indignant. How dare you? How dare you ask me? Why would I do that? But here's how I felt. I felt when I needed you at 14, you didn't go to bat for me. You didn't protect me against this woman. So now I'm back in and out of foster homes. This guy is cheating on you anyway. I just wanted you to see what type of guy. This is my thinking, but I just say no. And so what ends up happening is I don't have that baby. She has the baby and, separates from him because of their deal. When I get sober, she's on my amends list. But we talk about the type of amends. I don't get to make an amends at someone else's expense. I was prepared to be honest with her, but she had gone back to this man. She had her child at 40 years old, so she's older. This is important to her. I don't have the right. I didn't even like him. He was a horrible lady. I did not like him. Is that tacky? But it's true. You understand what I'm talking about. Don't do that. Don't do that. Men like to walk around with a lot of swag. I'm like, yeah, stop. Just stop. So, but the thing is, I need to feel free. I don't believe in putting myself at the top of any amends list. I think that's absurd. I've never heard of it. It's not in any literature that I read. The way I make amends to me is by making amends to you. I need to be able to finally show you the respect that I was incapable of. In the beginning, I was hurt. I was lost. And I come from a place of retaliation. That is a language I spoke fluently for a long time. She did not deserve that. And so when I made amends to her, I made amends to her for wrecking her car, for any disrespect I had ever demonstrated towards her, any harm I had ever shown her. And when I make amends to someone, I look them in the eye and I acknowledge every harm unless that harm will harm them further. And I ask, is there anything else that I have left out, any other harm that I have caused you that I am unaware of? And then I ask, and I don't tell them, I ask, how can I make this right? And I also thank them for whatever it is they've given me up to that point. Any amends, I'm going to find something, some quality that I appreciate to thank them for. Because when I do the inventory process with the women I sponsor, there's also something I ask them to write for me. After they've done all 3 inventories, I ask them to write a list of goals. Who is it you want to be? What do you want to be called? And so in order to grow into that, there are actions that must be taken. I needed to get free. I don't know if we had the conversation now, if I would be able to tell her. My mom. I made amends to my mom. That took 5.5 years. And so the interesting thing about making an amends is I have to make sure that I don't ever bring up anything you've done. I don't get to do that. And so with my mother, I just wasn't able to do it until I was 5.5 years sober. Matter of fact, I said I will never make amends to her, not because my mother has killed 3 children. She's prosecuted for one. They are investigating the case of the other one, and they don't know the identity, but they have the body of the 3rd one. And so because I know all of this and a lot more, I said, I'm never going to, nope. Look at what she did. Look at what she did. Look at what she did. But as I'm loving you and I'm working with women I sponsor, these women are courageous. These women are walking through their fears. They're taking actions that they don't even believe they're worthy of taking. And so it's hard for me to keep loving you and hating her, loving you and hating her. And so once again, there's that contradiction in my spirit because I'm not okay with what she's done, but I'm also heartbroken. I just want my mom to be my mom. And it pisses me off that that's never going to be the case. And it pisses me off that I don't have my stepmom in my life. I am not okay with it. I am sick of having to make the best of stuff. It pisses me off. So some days I'm okay with it, and some days I just suit up and show up because that's what you've taught me to get to the other side. And if you are new, you're going to have those days. And so I made amends to my mother. I wrote her because I wasn't strong enough to go see her. And she wrote me back. I wrote her acknowledging what I had done, getting loaded in her house, getting arrested for prostitution on her birthday, inappropriate behavior. She wrote me back that she was born again, no opinion. And and so you know, the agreement was that I would never, ever, 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 ever discuss what she had done. That's a part of my amends, but I don't understand it, and I want to understand it. I want to understand it because I'm a mom, even if my daughter's not in my life, because I'm godmother to some of the women I sponsor's children, because I just don't understand. Why wouldn't you get help for this? But I could never discuss it. That was a part of the amends. I was just there to clean up my side of the street, and as a part of what would you like me to do, she said, I'd like you to keep in contact with me. That's what I did. She really meant send her money. So that's what I did. And it was hard. There were times that those letters would come in my mailbox, and I would look at them, and it would just hurt. It would hurt so bad I couldn't even open them. And so I didn't open them. I just would send her a nice card saying nice things, and I'd send her money because that is what you taught me to do. And then when I was 10 years sober, my mother I guess she had written it in a couple of letters before, but I wouldn't always read them because it was so painful. But I want to honor these amends, right? This is years later. And she was saying something about chemotherapy. And I was like, what? What chemotherapy? And so I wrote her and I asked her what she meant. And she said she had lung cancer and she was dying. And I just remember feeling so sad that this woman is going to die behind prison walls in a small cell. And so I called my sister and I said, we need to go see her. My brother